World Today, where we will be focusing on China making inroads into the Indo-Pacific. But first up, the headlines. The US has raised concerns after Chinese and Cambodian officials came together for the expansion of Ream Naval Base. A court in the Donetsk region has given death sentence to 2 Britons and 1 Moroccan after they were put on trial for being mercenaries. The US House of Representatives have voted in favor of regulating the sale of guns. The bill, which is yet to pass in the Senate, bars sale of semi-automatic weapons to people under 21 years of age. China has been actively working towards increasing its sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific region, also known as the Asia-Pacific region. This has raised alarm bells among Western nations, the latest being a military naval base being built by China in Cambodia. While the United States of America fears that this could enable deployment of military forces in the Indo-Pacific theater and intelligence monitoring of US military by the Chinese forces, China accuses the US of spreading rumors as also bullying countries in the region. Here's a report.
The Indo-Pacific theater is increasingly becoming volatile with ever-growing threat of destabilizing the region. According to latest reports from the US, China is building a naval facility in Cambodia's Ream Naval Base for military use, the second such overseas outpost after Djibouti in Eastern Africa. And it's first in the strategically significant Indo-Pacific region. But China vehemently denies the reports. China and Cambodia both have said that they are beginning an expansion plan which does not entail Chinese military presence at the port.
The renovation of Ream Naval Base aims to strengthen Cambodian Navy's capability to maintain maritime territorial integrity and combat maritime crime. The US has ignored Cambodia's position, made malicious speculation on the matter, and attacked, discredited, and even threatened to put pressure on Cambodia. That is typical bullying.
The Indo-Pacific is an important piece for China's leaders. They see the Indo-Pacific as China's rightful and historic sphere of influence.
China and Cambodia are comprehensive strategic partners, and our cooperation in various fields is open, transparent, reasonable and legitimate, which benefits the two countries and their people and takes lead in building a new type of international relations and the community of shared destiny for the mankind.
Ream faces the Gulf of Thailand, adjacent to the South China Sea, where China has aggressively asserted its claim to virtually the entire strategic waterway. The US has refused to recognize China's sweeping claims and routinely conducts military maneuvers there to reinforce that they are international waters.
It is consistent with credible reporting we've seen from the PRC that the PRC is engaged in a significant ongoing construction project at Ream Naval Base. As we said, an exclusive PRC military presence at Ream could threaten Cambodia's autonomy and undermine regional security as well. We and countries in the region have expressed concerns about the lack of transparency on the intent, the nature, the scope of this project, as well as the role of the PRC military is playing in its construction and in its post-construction use of the facility.
Therefore, the Chinese foreign minister has been on a major diplomatic drive in many of the Pacific islands and tightening its hold through the Belt and Road Initiative, with a strong response from the Quad nations, particularly the US and Australia. Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong was also on a tour to the Pacific Islands for the second time in just 2 weeks, visiting Tonga and Samoa with a pledge to increase Australia's contribution to regional security. China, on its part, has signed a series of bilateral cooperation documents on the Belt and Road, climate change, fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, disaster prevention and mitigation, green development, health, agriculture, trade and tourism with the Pacific Island countries.
Finally, let me also say this. Recently, Some have been questioning why China has been so active in its support of the Pacific island countries. I want to tell everyone, China is a major developing country and a major country with a great sense of responsibility. We are not just supporting South Pacific countries, we are also supporting countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean. We are not only doing this today, we had always been doing so. Back in 1960s, China tightened its own belt and helped African countries build railways. That is because China always stands together with the rest of the developing world, in particular, small and medium-sized countries.
The race is on, and it is getting more serious with the involvement of militaries in these waters.
Joining me now to discuss a little more about the situation on the ground is Amrita Jash, who is an assistant professor at the Mahipal Academy of Higher Education. Professor Jash, many thanks for joining us here on World Today. Now, the infrastructure that is being discussed is of critical nature. It is critical infrastructure, while the United States of America has reported that a military naval base is being built by China and that there could be military presence, which is a concern. China and Cambodia are denying the reports. What is your reading on what you see from the reports that you're reading?
Well, my reading on this is that something is happening. There cannot be smoke without fire, and the Washington Post has reported that there is this military base in the making in the Ream Base in the Gulf of Thailand. Now, what supports this argument is that the Chinese ambassador to Cambodia recent remarks hailing the ironclad friendship between China and Cambodia and signaling or positing it very clearly that the military ties are the fundamentals of this ironclad friendship. And in the recent past, we already see the security pacts that China has signed like secretly with that of the Solomon Islands. So I don't think so one needs to be apprehensive of this military base that is in the offing. And China has already built a logistic or the first military base beyond its borders in Djibouti. So it's already there. So this only adds on to the one that is in existence.
Now, we've also seen recently more overt and aggressive engagement by Beijing when it comes to the Pacific nations. Do you think this will lead to a more volatile situation and a more volatile region, so to say?
I can't see volatile immediately, but I would like to draw some corollary to China's behavior, which we have seen in South Asia. We have seen that China encircling India in South Asia through its various naval and port facilities. We see it Hambantota in Sri Lanka, we see it in Gwadar in Pakistan. So a similar kind. Now this is an existence of port facilities in Indian Ocean, where China doesn't have a foothold. Similarly, in the Pacific Islands, which is again part of China's territory, China doesn't have a foothold. So the recent engagements and the way it is getting unfolded in terms of naval facilities, be it in the recent with that of Cambodia, it is trying to make its presence or build up, because we know undoubtedly if you see the whole makeup or framework of Indo-Pacific, whether we spell China loud or not, China is one of the key factors that leads to the countries coming together under a common, open and free Indo-Pacific vision. So China's way of port build-up or naval facilities is also signaling to its expeditionary capabilities, which is one of the aims that the PLA Navy wants to have. And in the current As per the current reports, China's navy is the largest in the world now. It has surpassed that of the United States, as per the DoD report. So where do you deploy these warships? So the waters, the Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So the Pacific Islands become the resort to China's quest in the Indo-Pacific.
Professor Jash, how do you think the AUKUS and Quad-like alliances, anti-China alliances of blocs, stack up against China? Because despite all these blocs, we see Beijing doing what it wants to in the region and far beyond as well.
Well, I would like to say that Quad or AUKUS are not anti-China specific. It is more about anything, like any kind of threat to a free and open Indo-Pacific. So China, we can't say it is getting undeterred because the very fact that too much of China's speculations which says that Quad is just in name, or there was much speculations on the very sustenance of Quad. But in the recent times, we see the speedy makeover of Quad and the way it has upticked, which is given by the leadership level meetings. And of course, the plus has been AUKUS to the larger Quad framework. So these mechanisms are a way of telling or putting a check and balance on China. And the various acts in terms of, be it the Malabar exercises. And Quad is expanding. We are talking of Quad Plus. Quad is not just about, but we need to get it clear that Quad is just not about China, but the greater ramifications of the security threats that China holds and the other aspects of threat that comes along with it.
What's also interesting is that China has chosen a formula of strategic and economic ties to really lure nations, and despite reports of debt traps, economic downturn, countries such as Sri Lanka suffering, we still see China going strong in many parts of the world and in many regions and countries.
Well, if you see a close reading of the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, there is no doubt that there has been a China factor attached to it. And debt trap, the very outcome, of the Belt and Road Initiative as demonstrated in China, in Sri Lanka, given its signing up for the Hambantota port, and the greater Chinese presence also in the domestic politics of Sri Lanka under the Rajapaksa government. So one cannot discount there has been a big China hand in the economic crisis in Sri Lanka. But it also not the China factor, but also Sri Lanka's own political setup, which has been aided with the China factor and has demonstrated. So if you are seeing, if Sri Lanka has been that, that red flag, that other countries who have joined the Belt and Road Initiative need to take stock of. That what it can lead to. We are also seeing some signs of it even in Pakistan, right, under the CPEC project. So it's just that Sri Lanka cannot be hidden anymore. The guy just became too blatant and too wide open to be surfaced on the ground.
Professor Amrita Jash, many thanks for joining us here on World Today. Now, this week was a tough one for the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who had to face a no-confidence motion in Parliament. While he survived the test that was brought against him by a rebel faction of the Conservative Party, this has indeed exposed the fact that not many Tory leaders now support the current Premier.
The Partygate scandal has been haunting British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, with the opposition garnering support to oust the leader.
Parliamentary party does have confidence.
Johnson might have survived the no confidence motion against him that was brought in Parliament, but there are bigger battles ahead. He survived the motion after securing 211 votes in support, while 148 members of his party voted against him, securing 59% of his lawmakers' support, much lower than the support his predecessor Theresa May got in 2018.
Mr. Speaker, we had a referendum, as I've told the House before, in 2014. I think he should respect the mandate of the people. And you know, he keeps saying that he wants his independence for his country. Our country is independent, Mr. Speaker. Our country is independent. Today we hear.
Having scored a sweeping election victory in 2019, the Prime Minister has been under mounting pressure after he and his staff held alcohol-fueled parties in his Downing Street office and residence when Britain was under strict COVID-19 lockdowns. Such was the anger that the party triggered a challenge, forcing an anonymous vote of confidence in a leader who had once seemed unassailable.
Week after week, I've called on this Prime Minister to resign. I've been met with a wall of noise from the Tory benches. I thought they were trying to shout me down, but all this time, Mr. Speaker, it turns out that 41% of them have been cheering me on. Because, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear, at least the numbers don't lie.
To be removed as the Prime Minister, at least 180 votes would have been needed against him by the Conservative lawmakers. Dozens of Conservative lawmakers have voiced concerns over Johnson's capability of holding the reins of the administration, which is facing the risk of recession, rising fuel and food prices, and strike-inflicted travel chaos in the capital, London. But the British Premier now plans to focus on economy to regain confidence of his party.
And there were huge investments that we're making, huge. But it's not enough just to spend money. You've got to spend it wisely. And we as Conservatives and Conservative ministers have got to make sure that at every stage we are driving reform and driving value. So what I'm going to ask you all to do in each of your departments is make sure that you're thinking the whole time about cutting the costs of government, about cutting the costs that business has to face, and of course cutting the costs that everybody else faces, families up and down the country.
For now, Johnson has won the ballot to avoid immediate resignation, but a larger than anticipated rebellion within his party has left him wounded and battling to win back the confidence of his colleagues and the general public.
And here are some other stories from across the globe in World at a Glance.
A court in the Donetsk region has given death sentence to 2 Britons and 1 Moroccan after they were put on trial for being mercenaries. According to the DPR authorities, they were captured in Mariupol by the Russian forces. The US House of Representatives voted in favor of regulating the sale of guns. As per the measures passed, the sale of semi-automatic weapons to people under 21 would be barred. There is also a ban on large-capacity magazines, but the bill is yet to pass in the Senate. The head of Paris police has acknowledged the failure of security operations for the Champions League, which was held in May. He also apologized for the tear gas used on the supporters. There is a lot of talk going on after Disney released Ms. Marvel, its first on-screen Muslim superhero. It is about a teenager and Avengers comic book fangirl, Kamala Khan, played by Pakistani-Canadian newcomer Iman Vellani.
What does it feel like?
That's all from me in this week's edition of World Today. Stay tuned to India Today for all the latest news and updates.